integrated master numerology. 1111 illuminates, awakens your inner self. So today is an 1111 day. My birthday, by the way, is June 5th, 1956. It's 11/11, 5/6/56. It only took me 60-something years to figure that out. But with your help and your connectivity, our 1111 connection, you know, brings enlightenment. And Crystal always goes, what are you doing with that 1111 stuff? You know, come on, what is that? What does it mean? I said, it just means consciousness. That's all it means. So we're here in the moment, we're here in the now, and I thank you for bringing 1111, my 6556, into my life. Appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to show you the video in a minute, which I think is a good. Thank you, Justin, right here. Let's put this on. YouTube.
Home, LG Content Store. The latest version of the software, yes button.
Okay, so we're just going to watch this first video.
Software update is in progress.
Gosh.
Please don't turn off your TV or disconnect the network. You can check the update status in settings. Close. Check now. Close button.
My family never knew what I did. I have cousins that, what do you really do again? I mean, they've known me my whole life and they don't know what I do. Okay. My name is Laurence Gartel, and I am a digital media artist, and I've been doing digital art for 30 years and it's funny because people don't recognize me as a photographer. I can establish myself more by saying that I'm more like Man Ray, or more like Robert Rauschenberg, who use photography as an image-making device so that they can make their art. In that sense, I mean, the photo is the photo base. I guess the controversy has always been more technical people who, you know, perhaps better lighting techniques and traditional ways of taking a picture. But to me, art is always about breaking the rules, and giving new insight into a new forecast. If I was just a regular photographer, I would have never come upon the digital age, and I could have never had the career that I had. I start out with a photograph, and then I go ahead and I alter it and enhance it through technical tools using the computer as a creative device. And I'll use a myriad of different programs. Far before Photoshop ever got onto the playing field as the industry standard, let's say, for manipulating photos, there's been hundreds of programs to be able to do things. And prior to that even, when I started out in media study, it was all analog systems, all knobs and buttons, and you had to tweak and you had to change, and there was a matrix board, and you had to set things so that one thing routed to another thing, and that thing routed to another. 99% of my art is my own photography, my own pictures. I'm taking my own photographs all the time, and it's mine. It's not like I'm using somebody else's work and collaging it into my use. If it is like that, then it's a matter of, let's say, taking an old ad or something that was used for something and add it into the collage and manipulate it and change it. But it was my photo taking that thing. It's not like how I use somebody else's. I think that's what's so different, is that it's so personal. I mean, everything I do is very autobiographical. Andy Warhol was not a technical person. And I had met him because I was going to Studio 54 all the time. Everyone was there. We struck up a conversation about art and stuff, and I told him what I was doing. He was very interested, and he had the commission to do the cover of Debbie Harry's next album. And he wanted me to show him how to use the new computer. Went to the studio and showed him deluxe paint. I don't know if he'd be able to do it without me, but I could certainly say he didn't know how to use the computer, and I helped him through it. The Absolut campaign that I did in 1991 was on the back cover of Art America, Art Forum, Sotheby's, Wired Magazine, Scientific American, and New York Magazine. And that was really huge exposure. Not only that, but the ad ran for 10 years. So I have to say that regardless, it definitely had big impact, and a lot of people saw it. If you had an Absolut ad, you were like a made man. I did the cover of Forbes in 1989. I mean, that's pretty commercial, but it was the first digital cover that they ever did. And, you know, how would you do a cover otherwise today? You know? But back then, that was like absolutely revolutionary to have something that was digital to be on the cover of a magazine and to be used in a commercial way. Coca-Cola was for the Olympics in 1996, so it was really quite huge also. But more importantly about that is the fact that they gave me creative freedom. Because if you look and see how Coca-Cola works, everything is really to the letter. I had things that were off the page. I had the word Coke and Coca-Cola in the same piece. I mean, that never happened. And instead of having art directors, there were attorneys that looked at that work. So they had to make sure that everything was perfect, and I had it up, running up the side of a rocket even. A little bit of the word was off. I mean, they never allowed that. So I think for them, they said, you know, let's roll with this, let's let this guy do his thing. And I think that's been the best part of my career, is that people hire me to do my work, and they give me the creative freedom to express myself, and I'm basically their spokesperson. I'm their voice of what they're trying to say. Elvis is an American icon, and I think that he really has done great, tremendous service to this country. First of all, he was a soldier, and I think that he was basically one of the greatest Americans that ever lived. A phenomenal talent, just like Picasso in that sense. It's like the work that keeps on giving, and that's what great art does. It just keeps on giving and giving, and it keeps on getting better all the time. Art is great work that moves you, that brings you to your knees, that makes you cry, that makes you happy, that just changes your day and gives you thoughts that are everlasting. I was asked to create the tour art for both Brittany and Justin. They were not allowed to be together. It was like you shoot one and then you shoot the other one. And she goes, well, where's your crew? Where's your people? Where's your Polaroids? Where's the this? And where's, I said, honey, I said, the real people just have all they need in their pocket. And I pulled this out and I photographed it.
Software update has been installed.
Yay.
Update will be applied when you restart your TV.
I think that that's kind of what I'm offering, is 30 years worth of showing you the history of the digital media from start to finish, for what I am.
So you have to know that, 7 minutes is your cutoff. So that's good. So listen, why are we here? We're here actually to talk about the most important part of all of this, is collectively putting all this material together to make a 3-volume encyclopedia, which I started 6 years ago. And I'm working my way through it. Now, if I was retired, I probably would have had it finished already. But, I'm actively working all the time. So I just would like to show you kind of what it's going to be. So it's going to be, this is 350 pages. I anticipate 500 pages per book, and there'll be 3 books. Because there's a lot to cover here. So you don't want to stay through all of this. You're just getting a little overview so you know what's going to be when this book comes out. And You know, it's, an artist lives his life every day. I mean, this is what you do. You get up and you're you, as opposed to getting up and doing something else. You're just you. And so, in doing that, you know, you have to produce, I guess. So, I would like you to know that you're here to witness the talking and the conversation about putting this together, and you'll be the first ones to be contacted when this book comes out. That's what I'll say. And we're anticipating 2022, mid-year. So it's a lot of work, but it's slowly it's being put together. Okay, here we go. So, the oldest piece of art, and this is why it's best to do it here instead of a PowerPoint or somewhere else when you're in the artist's studio, is I didn't take it off the wall because it, you know, it's like kind of fragile, but it's over my computer, over my face, which was printed by a lady painted my portrait, Florencia, and above it is a landscape that I painted when I was 10 years old. I invite you to go over after and take a look at it. That piece was in 1966. 10 years old. Long time ago. But what else was I doing when I was 10 years old? I had my actual football that I played with when I was 10. And, you know, Facebook is kind of interesting because you meet all your friends from public school. And one guy went on to have a football career, and I said, Ed, I threw you a pass with this ball. And he freaked out. And I have my original baseball glove. It's not the original ball. I would be lying if I said it was the real ball. But this is my childhood ball. So the child spirit is always in the artist, always. And so as we get closer, so 10 years old with the painting, we're starting to tell a story about a person, what they did, what they liked. Most recently, I gave a Zoom talk, to the Connecticut Science Teachers Association, so 150 science teachers in Connecticut. And one lady who ran the organization was someone that I went to public school with. And believe it or not, I found my autograph book, and she wrote something like, roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is lumpy, and so are you. And I gave it to her, and I showed it to her, and she turned beet red in front of all these people. I said, you were 10 years old? What are you doing? Anyway, so that kind of connectivity, this is also a story of then and now, more consciousness of who you were and who you are. It's very interesting from that perspective. So, moving forward. My first formal invitation in 1974, my first professional exhibition at the Panora Gallery. This is the only job I ever had, was I worked in a health food store over the summer so I could buy the frames. And then when I had enough money to buy the frames, I quit. And that was it. And that's the only job I ever had. And it makes sense because this was November to December. But I organized the whole thing with the gallery and everything at like 18, I think, 16? I can't do the math so good, but I think it's 18 years old. I had my first show, which was very cool. So the painting from this show, sorry, is in the bathroom. It's the second painting at the top. You can turn on the light and take a look at it. But the interesting thing is, I still have the price list of the work. And if I could find the exact work, but they're pretty much all the same. you know, and they're numbered number 1, number 2, whatever. Probably, you know, between $90 and $125 at 18 years old. I still have the prices. So, you know, that even surprises me that I have this. But, okay, so now it's 1974, and I still didn't, like, this digital art didn't really happen yet. And in 1973, I went to the School of Visual Arts for painting. I went to the High School of Music and Art for 73 to 77. That's the famed high school. I made a movie about it. I went there. Basically, we cut school and we went next door to CCNY to watch Earth, Wind, and Fire, which they had great concerts there. The food was a lot better at CCNY than it was at Music and Art. So I used to go over there all the time. But, so my high school girlfriend went to Buffalo for school, and I said, you know, if I don't follow her, I'm gonna lose her. So I better go up there. So she went to the University of Buffalo, and I tried out for that school, and they turned me down. So I went to Buff State. So in that time period, I was sitting in the back of a classroom, it was a film appreciation class, watching the movie Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin. And I was in the back with a very long lens, and a guy like taps me on the shoulder, surprises me, and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm curious if I could take a still picture off the screen and make a still." He goes, "You know, we have," funny you should say that, "we have a place here that does that." And I said, "Does what?" I said, "I don't know what I'm trying to even do." He goes, "Well, listen, on Friday night, come to this place and you'll see." I said, "All right." So it was Friday night, it was in the worst neighborhood in the world. I thought I was gonna have my camera, my wallet, my car, I knew everything, but I went anyway, because when you're curious, you do things. So I went there and they said to me, "Okay, the place is yours, have at it." And I'm like, have it what? You know, so it was a room that was probably 4 times the size of this, with knobs and buttons and wires and computer systems, and I didn't know anything about this. So I started to turn the knobs. And believe it or not, in the process of making this book, I found what I call day 1, hour 1. My first attempt of computers without knowing anything about them whatsoever. So I have a series of prints that I can unveil to you that have never been shown, never been seen, and it's a real treat to be able to look at these pictures. And it really doesn't even matter good or bad, it's just that they're here. That we had our first interaction with the computer so long ago. So what was I doing? I was just taking a picture of the screen. I didn't know how to take a picture of a screen. I just took a picture of the screen.
How old you were?
How old? I was 19 years old at the time. But the truth of the matter is that I knew that I stumbled upon something that I would never let go of. It was something that was going to define, and as your book says, Rumi, do you know the quote by heart?
Oh,
Your
what
book?
what you're seeking is seeking you.
Yes. What you're seeking is seeking you. I love it. That just marries these artworks so well. Anyway, I'll step this up, but I just wanted to share some of these incredible things done in 1976, day 1, hour 1. Okay. I even found pictures of like flowers and like what it was all about. But anyway, when I got a little bit better, as in like 3 days later, I then produced work like this, which is like a giant leap from that other work, not knowing a thing, and then learning or having a feel of what you can possibly do. So I call this my first piece, technically speaking, even though it's not. But it's
not.
The first time you could really like, you know, I guess you could hit a golf ball and then you could really hit a golf ball, you know. So this, I felt like I was really hitting the ball as opposed to just swinging, perhaps. Okay, so anyway, day 1, hour 1. So it's interesting because that was 1976. What was going on in between? What happened? So at the time, it's interesting because I was still painting. People have not seen this work. So it's been hidden. 1978. And there's like little stories on the back. But I never show this work. I never talk about it, but it's all going to be in the book. That's why I'm showing it to you. Experimenting with materials, like gel, for instance. But I was uncomfortable because I didn't know where I belonged. I felt like I found this computer system, but I lived in Queens. That's a far ride from Buffalo, New York, as in like 8 hours and like, you know, feet of snow. I mean, so I like had to like try to figure it out, what I was going to do. So I was still kind of in that mode. Okay, you get the idea about these. 1978. My dad was very, very, very sick. My dad had 5 heart attacks and a stroke, which had its play on me, I have to say. So at the same time, I was making these drawings, which was, these are really important to me. Why? Because it's a bridge between watching his heart rate and the oscilloscope of the computer was mimicking, doing similar things. So I was trying to work out my angst, I guess. What other word can you use for suffering and worry? And I was an only child. So, I mean, I only like spoke to my German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd actually was quite confident. He actually answered me. So that was helpful, I have to say. But aside from that, I was just working out my problems by making these works. And I'll tell you this, I haven't seen these works in years. I discovered them when I started opening my boxes and finding myself. There are boxes there, especially the story about the light above. This was in a box for 30 years. And I was going to buy something at Home Depot, and I said, you know, I found it. I'm gonna try this. And I said, you know, I'm gonna paint it. I painted it pink, and it felt too much like a boudoir. So I said, no, I'm gonna paint it red. So this was hanging in my apartment in the Bronx in like the 60s. And I decided, and we had it rewired. And I repainted it, and that was that. Amazing. So it's here. So my childhood is here. There's a picture inside where this table is there, the sculpture is there. I was 3 years old. I'm living with my childhood here. So I'm still working things out, I want to say. Anyway, there are many drawings like this. Okay. 1978, 1979. You know, people say, when did you get your, when did success, what was that break? Well, you know, I don't think there was ever a break. I just think that things happened along the way. You know, like that. So this is the cover of Newsday in Long Island, the entertainment section, 1979. So after 1979, I had a show at the Nikon House Gallery in Rockefeller Center. And if you know New York, Rockefeller Center is where they put the tree every year, the ice skating rink, and right there was Nikon House Gallery. And the most major photographers would show their work at Nikon House. Was the most prestigious, it was the most grandiose. If you did that, and I was all of 20, I was the youngest person to ever show. I was probably 24 years old when I had this show. And what happened, as fate had it, why not have the original photo it came from?
Baby.
That was about 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
I didn't
Yes.
know.
Yeah, 1980. Right. Anyway, the show, I was so super excited. What a victory to have this exhibit. And it opened the day of the transit strike.
Oh, no.
And no one could get there except the homeless that came in and ate all the food that was the platters and the and talk about catching a break. There was no break. Maybe a broken heart, perhaps, but that's about it. Anyway, 1980. 1980 was a very interesting year. In 1980, I was on the cover of Video Magazine, 1980. So this is not the first magazine. I was looking through to find the very first one I was on, and I couldn't find it, but it's there somewhere. But anyway, a video magazine. No one even knew what video was. There was not even like, there were no cassettes to put in or things like that. But there was an interesting little story. Now I'm fumbling because I had a thing here. Yes, okay, so this is interesting and telling. So here I am. Frozen moments in time. The future of all video lies in its aesthetic application.
Very cool.
1980. I gotta step back just a few years. So while I was doing those video drawings and I was sort of getting into learning about computers and so on and so forth, my friend Nina, I created what I call the Metamorphosis Series. And so they are in my book that I'll show you in a moment. So this is just a series of portraits.
Was that
That's not a
Photoshop?
portrait. Photoshop didn't exist.
Oh, didn't exist.
No
So-
such thing. I don't even know what Photoshop, I don't even know what he was talking about in 1978.
Wow. So what was it?
It was what I'm telling you, all this crazy paraphernalia, the knobs and buttons and wires, and that's what it was. It was analog system computers. And I printed these myself. I went to CW Post College for my master's degree in photography. And of course the teacher was part of the FSA Photography Association, and he was a documentary photographer, and he said, "What is this crap?" Don't ever say that, because you're going to prove yourself wrong. So this is what I was doing at that time period as a student. And this was like, you know, far and above and beyond. And no one ever saw this sort of thing before. By the way, I was photographing the screen, and that's why there are all these scan lines and so on and so forth through the work. Because it was the screen. Now the screens are so good, you don't even see that sort of stuff anymore. You know, people take photos on the screen. It's exactly what I was doing 43 years ago. Anyway, you get a little idea, a little taste of this series. What did I look like when I was doing that? Well, that was 1980. This was a couple of years before. That's the guy doing that work.
How old you were there?
22. You know, I think I'm still 22, except I pass a mirror. And I get a reality check or some sort of check. I'm not quite sure what the check is. But you know, there were many books that have been written, really hundreds of books, where my digital works were included. 1981, stepping up and graduating was a very interesting year. This is the piece down below, and there's a piece behind the door that, if we can close the door. Let's close the door. And look at the second piece at the top. That is what is called a video drawing. So that was done at a place where Tron was made on that particular computer, interestingly enough. And basically it was like a 30 by 40 inch drawing tablet where it was produced by NYIT, New York Institute of Technology, at a place called Digital Effects. And interestingly enough, there's a piece in my bedroom from that series that was shown at the Museum of Modern Art. That's why it's kept in the bedroom. But that's a very significant piece because to them, that was like groundbreaking, and they thought it was highly significant. So that's 91, 92. I won't bore you with all of this stuff, but this was a show at the University of Oklahoma in Norman. And they had pretty significant artists. I'll just read you the roster. Bradshaw Downs, Robert Mapplethorpe, Larry Zott, Robert Adams, Dan Roden, Dan Christensen, Sandy Scoglin, Daryl Hutto. These were really major artists in the 80s. And little Laurence Gartel just happened to join this group. It was unreal because I'm all of like 24, something like this. Imagine that. But here was the real breakthrough at the Long Beach Museum of Art, 1983. So now I'm 26, 20, I can't add anymore, but I think it's 27 years old, where I was showing at the Long Beach Museum, and I showed these Polaroid SX-70 Mirals is what I was doing at that time. And it was like a quilt of SX-70s, and I had Polaroid funding me. And they said, I'll tell you what, you make a piece, and we'll send you all this film, so I had cartons and cases of film, and then they wanted something in return. It became like, wait a minute, I'm giving away too much for what I'm getting. I'll just go out and buy the goddamn film. And so they have a number of my works in their collection because it was like on a barter system, you know. So, but the work was shown, Mozocean, which if you Google Mozocean, you'll see what Mozocean is. It's 324 individual Polaroid SX-70s put together. And it was shown at the North Museum here in 91, and a couple of other museums, but then the insurance to insure the piece got too much. So I don't show that piece, it's away, let's say. This was an interesting show, the second emerging expression biennial, the artist and the computer. This was at the Bronx Museum of the Arts in 1986, I believe. And yep, here's I started doing black and whites because this is when Macintosh came out with the first black and white Macintosh computer. Actually, they had a commercial for it during the Super Bowl of 1985. And I saw that and I jumped on it. And what did I do? I made stuff, I printed it out on an image writer, which was with a ribbon. And then I took it to a stat shop and I made these giant 40 by 50 inch contact prints. They made a negative and then they made a positive by making this giant negative. And that's how these pieces have been made. And I've shown them, and actually, I think some of them might have been in the last show at the Palm Beach Photographic Center, if I remember correctly. I think there was some of those in that show. And it's really funny because one of my friends wrote on Facebook, she says, I think there's a nude of me somewhere in this presentation. I'm exposing myself by saying it, but I think so. And lo and behold, the answer is yes, and there she is. 1986. And I said to her, I think there's more than one. Okay, moving along. So October of 1990, that's how many years ago? 30, 31, 32?
31.
31 years ago. 31 years ago. And in keeping, 31 years ago, a show in Poland on photography. New Spaces in Photography, 1990. And there were only two artists from America represented in this exhibition in Poland. Who could the other artists be? I turn the page back, and lo and behold, it's Christo. So Christo and Laurence Gartel in the same show in Poland. Not too shabby. Okay. 1990, 91, 92, we're up to 92. Boy, this is going to take a long time. I just realized. We're at 92. We may need a break. This reminds me of How the West Was Won. I watched this movie with my dad. I never saw a movie in two parts before. It was like an intermission for a half hour because people were exhausted by the time they got to it. But I used the first digital camera to go around the world and photograph the master golf tournaments. So I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I photographed Jack Nicklaus and Lee Trevino with the first digital camera. So people were so fascinated with my camera, they didn't even, and these were golfers, they didn't even care about old Jack. It was amazing. But this is even more amazing. What this article says, written by, the editor of the magazine, and he says this: when you take an art legend like Laurence Gartel and mix him with the likes of Jack Nicklaus and Lee Trevino, the result is what you see on the following pages. Gartel shot the images in April at the Tradition at Desert Mountain, presented by Golf Illustrated. Trevino, portrayed below, was the victor by a single stroke. Well, wait a second. This is a golf magazine. They didn't say when you take a legend like Jack Nicklaus and you mix him with an artist like Laurence Gartel. They said when you take an art legend like Laurence Gartel and mix him with the likes of Jack Nicklaus. He said, oh my word. This is really something very special, I have to say. So I went around the world at that point. I went to Scotland and I photographed them over there, and Augusta. It was just a really magical thing. So anyway, that's that. JAL Airlines, Japanese, I guess the Japanese airline. They did an 8-page story on that Nouveau Japonica series that I told you about in the hallway. The story of that, which is what the art car is about. So anyway, eight pages on Nouveau Japonica. This image of the bird just keeps coming up. This bird was on like 5 different magazine covers. First it was Forbes, then it was that Compute magazine. Now it's on the cover of the British Journal of Photography. This must have meant something to people. 1992. And we all know, probably the most iconic of everything, Wired magazine, 1994, but I tried to find the original one in 1991, which I couldn't find, but it's there somewhere. So the Absolut ad. The Absolut ad ran for 10 years, from 91 to 2001. Made with the same camera that I shot the golfers with. The first digital camera ever using Photoshop 2.0. And people said, did anyone say anything about the bottle being out of focus by any chance? And I said, yes, they did, as a matter of fact. They said, if you drink enough vodka, this is what the bottle looks like. This is the greatest ad you've ever had.
That's funny.
Okay, 1996, cover of photo. Listen, this is going to go on ad infinitum. I'm going to try to move this up a little bit and talk about some really crazy stuff like this. This is called doll.
What?
Doll. D-O-L-L. Doll. Now, what's interesting about this? It's printed on perforated paper. And what does that mean? That means if you break it up and maybe you slip it on your tongue, it's a hit of LSD.
Really?
So this is quasi-illegal because if you get stopped by a policeman and you happen to have this in your car, they could arrest you for the potential of carrying LSD until proven that this paper hasn't been dipped. So, interestingly enough, of course, the greatest names in that subculture made blotter art. This is what it's called, blotter art. If you look it up, you'll find some very interesting, notorious names associated with blotter art. Okay. Paranoia Magazine, 2008. Lydia Cacho. So Lydia Cacho is the spokesperson in Mexico for children and women human trafficking. She works towards human trafficking for women's rights. And she's been, almost murdered on several occasions. They honored her at the Waldorf Astoria the year after this cover came out for all the work that she's done in that area, in human trafficking. Okay. Wow, we're moving fast now. 2015, of course, I showed you outside, but here is the program guide to the 57th Annual Grammy Awards. Yeah. And I feel that this, speaking of the synergy between the doll and this, like, how much LSD do you think the person had to have taken to create something like this? And the answer is only one time. Because then it could get lodged into your spinal tap. And it's there forever. And that's why the whole room looks magenta to me, in any case. 2018. Cover of Pompano magazine. Nice little story inside. A man ahead of his time. The cover of Bokeh magazine, 2018. The cover of Motorhead. And there's just a little thing about the art cards in here. But I'm beginning to see the connection between that doll picture and all the rest of the work that's here now. Sort of got a little enlightened tonight. And 2020, God, they're still talking. I must be doing something right. Here's a magazine, Eyes, and the visionary father of digital art. This is published in Australia. Okay. Next. We're going to go to the book section of the lecture. My first book, Laurence Gartel, A Cybernetic Romance, which was published by Gibbs Smith in Utah, and the introduction was written by Namjoon Pike, the video artist, wrote the intro to the book, which to me was a great thing. So again, 1989 was a very interesting year. It was a year that I did the cover of Forbes, was when the book came out, and then my show at the Joan Whitney Payson Museum in Portland, Maine. And, but this came out a year before, but it's the same title, Cybernetic Romance. So I got a full Sunday New York Times review with the book and the art because of a museum show that I had at the same time that the book came out. And again, I was probably 33 years old at the time when this stuff happened. Seems like yesterday, but I know it's not. Okay. 1998 is when I really started to move into the art world on a much higher level, I guess. And my book, Laurence Gartel, Art and Technology, was published by Edizione Mazzotta in Milan. And the sponsor of this book was none other than Apple. And Apple paid, and they don't sponsor anybody, if you noticed. Nobody. It's autonomous. Only Apple. This was my Think Different ad. And the Think Different ad, they had Golda Meir, Jackie Robinson, Jim Henson, Gandhi, Picasso, and myself. The only living artist to ever have an Absolut ad, which was frightening at the time. Why should I be the only one living? I said, maybe I don't have much time on it. I don't know. But they sponsored the book, and here's their logo inside, because that's what they wanted, to show that digital art, that they're associated with digital art.
What year?
1998, Sal.
Very cool.
Very interesting. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so, I'm looking in the book, there's a couple of interesting things in here, like producing the art for the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival and hanging out with Robert Evans, my favorite person.
He's a cool character.
He was a cool character, and I love they did an SNL on him. And he said, I like girls between the age of 18 and 19. And I will never forget that for some reason. It just sort of stayed with me. Elon Musk, I could, whatever. But that was sort of interesting. So the book has my work with Philip Morris. I traveled around Germany in every single city, major city, throwing parties. I guess I'm good at that. What can I say? And we threw parties, and we had like posters and banners and umbrellas and all sorts of stuff relating to Philip Morris. And people said, do you smoke? I said, why would I do that? So, it was all about the promotion and the art. And to think that my parents, the work was called Past, Present, and Future. So this was the past, and I put my family members in it. And to have my parents and their family all over Germany was quite something, I have to say. The present, jumping in the pool in Florida. The future, my little puppy Elvis, the Dalmatian, is in here somewhere. I can't even find him from this view, but he's in there somewhere. Past, present, future. So they all represented cigarette boxes with a red crest and a blue label. That was the theme. Okay, the rest, the Coca-Cola stuff you saw in the video, the art for the Atlanta Olympics for Coca-Cola. Yeah, now more to stuff that I really appreciate and enjoy is the fact, the book, La Storia dell'Arte. The story of art. And it starts with cave paintings. Cave paintings. 30,000, I think they went back, this book says 30,000 years ago, but I think they found out it was 60,000 years ago that they made these cave paintings. And being the forward to the book. Now it starts. Now we're talking about who started the digital art movement. Who started it? And the art of the digital age, with an inscription that I would like to read you from the author, Larry. To a living legend and great artist, I'm so glad to have you in this book. Looking forward to seeing you in Florida so we can toast to the good old days. Bruce Wands, who wrote the book. And in there is what I considered my greatest piece. I've still been trying to top it, to tell you the truth. And I try with this piece on the wall to the left. And I call that piece the Ventriloquist because she really, doesn't really say too much there. But what I consider my greatest piece is called Coney Island Baby, which is this piece here. And this piece could be found at the Daniele Gallery as a 50 by 60 inch work. Okay. So, another book which is called Automotion. And Automotion is a book about Ferraris. But I couldn't name it Ferrari because then I'd have to go through Ferrari and get approval, and they'd have to look at every page and scrutinize everything that I was doing. So I said, screw it, I'm just going to call it the art of Automotion. But every picture in the book is about Ferraris. And we have two pictures that are in the book right there for you to see. These are printed on the first Iris printer, 1986, and I got a artist residency at Alfred University, and they happen to have this particular printer, and it takes about 2.5 hours to print each piece. But it's on this magnificent watercolor paper, and if it was during the day, you'd be able to see every discernible dot there is to make these pictures. I tell you, they're really exquisite prints. So, they're in the book, actually, so let me show you. Here is, what's it called? Ferrari Robots, the brown one. Yeah.
Can you still buy those, the books?
The book? Yes, there are still a few available. And the way that it's sold is that you choose a number, and if that number is available, it could be signed over to you. So if your birthday is May 29th, if number 529 is available, it'll be signed 529 over 2,000. The book is $2,000, by the way. And the other print, which is really interesting, which we can really discuss all day, every one of these pictures and things could be spent much time with. And that picture is over there on the left. This is made with sound again. So the frequency of sound is changing the image detail. So a high-pitched sound raises the imagery here in terms of the value. So a high, which would be, let's say, white, would be high, and a dark color would be down, and you could tweak it and modify the sound to make the images. So I made, like, however many there are, 12 different pictures together in one piece, like a collage, I guess. And in this book is something really great, which is this. So I was commissioned by a collector who recently passed away, I'm very sorry to say. He commissioned me to make a 3D sculpture. So 3D sculptures are pretty well, you know, people say 3D sculpture. But 3D sculpture in 2008 was like an impossibility. And so this was like an epic movie. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $12,500 to do it. I said, okay. And then he goes, how's it coming? I said, well, we have some problems. We need more money. And for what, you know? So like, anyway, it turns out that the piece cost $75,000 to make. Why? Because if you have one broken vertex and you hit Command P, it won't print. And there are over 400,000 wire mesh, and so if you don't know what I'm talking about, no problem. We have details to show you, blueprints of the inside of the sculpture. So finally, after a year, the sculpture wasn't ready for the book. It never happened during the course of the book, unfortunately, or the show, because it was supposed to be like the showcase of the show, and it didn't happen, unfortunately. But the sculpture was finally made, and if you look online and type in Gartel 3D sculpture, you'll be able to see the end result. But having said that, I had a file. I was the spokesperson for the 3D print show in Santa Clara, California. I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a booth there where a guy said, "We fix everything." I said, "Really? You fix everything?" That's their job. They can fix any broken file. I said, "You're on." He goes, "We're here for 3 days." He said, "Well, we'll fix it in 3 hours." Well, 3 hours came and went, couldn't fix it. I said, "Tell you what, show's on for 3 days, I'll give you 3 days. By the end of the show, he goes, "You couldn't fix it." "But we can fix it." I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you 3 weeks. Well, 3 weeks later, of course, it wasn't ready. And then I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you 3 months to try to fix this file." And I'm telling you that the first go-round with this took me a year to be able to do it. But he did, and he made me a little version. Of course, they charge a lot for this stuff. And so, here is the sculpture. Here is, now this was 18, imagine 18 inches in red plastic. $75,000 to make. That's not profit.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
It's crazy.
And this road is attached to the sculpture. That's how fragile this thing is.
Wow.
2008?
2000 and, well, this version is 2015. But the original file was 2008.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. I have not tried it. I have not tried it yet. No.
Look at that. Is that a plastic?
It's plastic, but it's all one piece. It's not glued together. That's the point. This thin little road, and imagine it being this big, you know, it's like 18 inches tall, and however wide, it's big for that. It should have cost $5,000 back then. I don't know what it costs today. I don't know. But while we're on the subject of 3D printers, of course, you know, this is kind of a no-brainer. Laurence Gartel, I said to my children, you know, you can have me forever. I don't age. Just,
There you go.
that's it. That's it, yeah. Right? There's that. And then there's also, now this I'm going to have to walk around as well. And I should show you the original so you can have a reference, because you're never going to see it. Yeah, let me just show you this. 1990. Oh, getting close. Here. So this is what I'm going to show you that was translated into a 3D You can't call it a sculpture because there's no chiseling. It's a 3D print. Chiseling being sculpture. You're hammering into a surface. Anyway, and really I should hold the light up behind it for you to see this. let's get close so you can see the face. See flat, you don't see anything, but here. Amen.
Watch out for that cell phone.
Oh, don't worry about it. Hey, it's my fault. Thank you.
Some of this is up close and personal, I realize. So, let me just say, before we get to the last hurrah, that these books, I have 2 books here. These books were on the exact table 60 years ago. And this was my inspiration. These are the books that I looked at as a child. On this very table. 60 years later, here it is. So to lose the track. These books, like, I saw these books and I was swept away. I was 5. I mean, there's a whole set, but I thought to show you what motivated Laurence Gartel. Great work of Renoir. And last but not least, the latest, greatest Shishibo art cubes and a limited edition. So you saw a nice little tower that's going on over there, or this shape here that was produced. And the story of how this all came about is really almost a miracle, I will say. If this doesn't have 1111 in it, I don't know what does. But I'll say, as you look at this, one day I was sitting here and all of a sudden I went to this picture and I went, aha. This was always in my consciousness. Somehow, some way, this led to it. I have one other thing, as I trickle around the room here. I came down to Florida with my parents in 1970. We stayed at the Nautilus Hotel on 18th Street. And I went to Miami High School, and they had coconuts on the floor. I went, coconuts? My God, I was 14. And I took this picture in 1970, and it's an art card.
Oh, wow.
That's only 51 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have landmarks for ourselves that we don't even know. If you're in consciousness, you can find them. They're all around us. We just have to be aware enough to see these things. So I like to make those discoveries. And our greatest thing now is our Shishibo cube in the limited edition box. And I'm so proud of this thing because to me, it's the next generation of digital art. I I mean, I've shown you the whole road from day one, hour one, and now the box in 2021. And so the sleeve is off. We have this. This is a bit of a commercial show, but that's okay. It comes with a 50-page booklet so people know who Laurence Gartel is. They know who the artist is. Talks about all the things I talked about that I don't have to rehash. There's the booklet to show you the manual, user manual, I suppose, to show you all the magnificent shapes you can make. And by the way, there's 70 shapes per cube, of course. It comes with a signed print and a certificate of authenticity. So each box is numbered. And by the time you actually get to the cube, it's almost anticlimactic at that point, but it's a lot of fun. And the more shapes you can use, the more things you can do. So if you have 4 cubes, you can make all different kinds of things. I'm not so good at it. Kevin is really an expert. He can do it. If I open it up and I can't put it back together, he certainly can. So, you know, just to show you, you open it up, you make all these marvelous shapes, and if you can take another cube and make the same shape, 2 cubes can be put together and build something even bigger with this sort of thing. And they actually are selling it now, as we found out, at the Museum of Discovery and Science, just right up the block. But they're in every single Barnes & Noble in the country, so I'm so happy about
And
it.
Amazon.
Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Of course, I didn't even think about it. You know, I didn't even think about it. So listen, thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it. You got the gist on 50 years of digital art. If you have any questions or you want to say something, now is the time.